Welcome to Season 2, Episode 20 of the Randy Wilson Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Tiffany, Jana, and today we have Bill Martin, Director of the Valentine. Bill leads over 50 museum staff members in telling the story of Richmond lifestyle and culture. For more than 20 years, Martin has diversified the Valentine's programming, expanded Richmond walking tours and group tours, and worked collaboratively in the community to promote city tourism and initiatives. Martin has a whole lot of education from the University of Virginia Tech. Following years of experience directing museums in Georgia, Florida, and Virginia, he joined then Valentine Musem in 1993 as the Director of Marketing and Public Relations. Under his leadership, the institution has expanded civic involvement, developed more than 300 themed tours, and raised millions for capital improvements, renovated historic structures, and expanded programming. Martin serves on the Board of Directors of the Richmond Business Council and the Leadership Metro of Richmond. He chairs the Richmond Region Museum Directors and is a member of the Richmond Mayor Tourism Commission. Martin has been actively involved in the community conversations about societal issues and cultural enrichment, and recently collaborated with many educators and scholars to create Downtown Heritage Walking Trail, the Richmond Liberty Trail, which joins the Richmond Slave Trail. Before joining the Valentine, Martin was Director of Tourism and Museums for the City of Petersburg, Virginia, Executive Director of Jacksonville Museum of Arts and Science in Florida, and Executive Director of Okefenokee Heritage Center.
You're going way back.
Oh yeah, we won't go that far back because Bill is a very young man. As you see, he has a lot of accolades, and it's definitely a pleasure, sir, to have you today on our podcast. It is great.
I am very proud to say that Bill Martin is my friend. And that we
for a long time.
And once upon a time, you were an advisor on our board of advisors for my company. Yes. So thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Yay!
Let's do it. What's going on in life.
Well, so I've invited people to join us at the Randy Wilson Podcast as I was thinking about folks who are using their time, their talent, their brilliance, their acumen in service of a better world. And I've been in Richmond 26 years, about approximately as long as you've been at the Valentine, and you are no ordinary director of no ordinary museum. What you have done, both with the museum and in the community, I think is kind of extraordinary. So I'm interested in what motivates you to be so extraordinary, and how are you using the museum as a tool to do something different?
I don't think we've done anything that's that extraordinary. I think that if you get up every day and you do what is the best you can do that day with the people and the resources, building those things together, that something good happens. Mm-hmm. And so, I've been at the Valentine 25 years. Would I have imagined that I would have been there 25 years? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Would I imagine that the institution would look the way it looks today? Absolutely not. But I think it is pretty extraordinary what the staff and our trustees in this community have allowed us to do in some really interesting ways that we just pushed people a little. It's like, what's the right thing to do today? Mm-hmm. What's the right thing what is this community, what's the issue we need to talk about? And how can we drop, because it's so often we start these conversations with, this is what the problem is right now, we got to, versus stepping back from that issue and taking a look at how did we get here?
Right.
What's the history of this thing? Are there things we've learned in the past that maybe we've forgotten? That we need to reconnect with that past, because otherwise they always say that you're destined to repeat it. But I think that there's a lot of truth that there's so many, and it's not just from the formal past, but it's talking to our parents and our grandparents, understanding who we are, mm-hmm. not only as a community, but individually, is the sort of key to moving forward. And so we've done a lot of programs around bringing that perspective to the table. And so, what does history mean at a table? So, for instance, a few years back, we did a conversation around voting. Well, it's pretty interesting that we're talking today so much about women's voting and the ERA. Well, guess what? You know, it has been an issue of discussion forever. And in fact, one of the earliest suffrage leaders was actually one of the Valentine family members, Lila Mead Valentine. She was the founder. But in her same family, and in fact the majority of white women in Richmond were opposed to their own suffrage. There was actually an association, the Anti-Women's Voting Association.
Was led by women?
Led by women.
Oh my God.
You know, so suddenly we can pull back and
Yeah.
go, how could someone act in a way that appears by today's standards to be against your own your own interest?
Yeah.
And yet there were other things at play at that period about the role of faith and religion and the role of the husband in marriage, and all of those things were all at play. And so so you can step back and go, okay, maybe I need to dig a little deeper to understand this more. And understand that person who I may disagree with today, that seems totally opposed to something I'm thinking, but not getting behind it. Why is that person thinking that particular thing at this moment? Yeah. It seems so contrary to what I think is right, what is just, and yet if we step behind that, why does someone feel that way? What in their life, what in their history brings them to that point? If you get there, you might actually have a legitimate, honest conversation. But you got to know and try to understand where a person is coming from. And in the Valentine's case, understanding where a community has come from, where that history has come from, and pulling that into conversations that we're having today.
So there's something that I love in particular about the way that you tell stories and tell the stories of our community. I mean, I feel like in any museum, you have the opportunity to curate in a given direction, to tell a story or narrative from a certain perspective. And what I've experienced consistently over the years at the Valentine is that when it comes to, I mean, my world is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when it comes to diverse representation and telling as much of the whole story as you can get your hands on, I've seen you all do that, you know, about as well as I've seen anyone ever do it. When I first came to Richmond and I heard of the Valentine, I just assumed old white people telling old white people stories.
Well, there's a whole lot of white people.
That is, yes.
And some old white people, me. But, you know, I think that it's part of our role is to open ourselves up, open the community up to those conversations. And so we do. You know, again, it's getting up every morning and going, what's the right thing?
But you're telling everyone's story in a way that's really honoring and equitable.
Well, because we're honoring what I think are basic values. Now, you know, it's hard for us to say, well, you know, there's Jefferson, all those folks talking about all the, you know, liberty and freedom and justice. And yet, you know, here in Richmond, you know, down on a corner not too far from here, the first time any government in the entire world voted to say every person has a freedom of conscience is just a few blocks away. Now, this is written by someone we know who had clay feet, who had a complex life. But, you know, I think if we start looking at those basic values of freedom, mutual respect, justice, all of those things that are sort of the words we talk about, and the rails, the guide rails sort of change over time, don't they? And that each generation works on making those guide rails wider and broader. So it's not as if it's about creating bigger guide rails so that people, that there are more and more people that really understand that this is about some basic, and you know, this sounds horrible, American things, that we are about this notion of justice, hardwired in. Racism, the racist is hardwired in too. The gender discrimination is hardwired in too, but at the core, there are these things that we want to believe about ourselves. And I actually can't, the things you can't get up in the morning and not believe is that that people at their hearts believe what's good. You know, that in fact there's a right way. There are things you don't do to other people. They're things you don't say. You know, and I think that for me is getting the, and that's what history can tell us, that no matter what period in Richmond history you look at, middle of the Civil War, middle of the Civil Rights Movement, beginning of the country, there are always people doing the right thing.
I'm curious, Bill, in looking at your career of all the things that you've done, what has been the right things or things, period, that has kept you at the Valentine for 25 years?
I said, would never have imagined I'd been at the Valentine for 25 years, but every day for me and for our staff, we discover something that we didn't know. You know, we have this amazing collection of objects. There's 1.6 million objects. Photographs and costumes and textiles and paintings, and you just name it, it's all there. And we discover something new about the city by looking at that object that seems like the same thing we've been looking at every day. And suddenly you go, oh, that explains that, you know, whatever that is. Yeah. So, I mean, a classic example would be a simple neighborhood. Like, we think we know what we know about Highland Park and Barton Heights. Okay. You know, today those neighborhoods seem to be principally African-American neighborhoods, and in fact, most people don't remember those neighborhoods being anything other than African-American neighborhoods. But in fact, there's a really kind of interesting story to tell, because Highland Park, 1890s, when the trolleys are going out, Highland Park is Little Italy.
Oh, wow.
That's Richmond's Italian neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right. Don't know that.
No.
You know, and yet there's St. Elizabeth, St. E's Catholic Church right there. Oh. That was the Italian church, because those Italians, when they came to Richmond, recruited to build the cathedral, you know, they tried to go to St. Patrick's Church, the Catholic Church in Churchill, and they were told, oh no, you're dirty Irish.
Gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can't come to our church. They tried to go to Holy Cross, and that was the German Catholic Church located in what was a, you know, German neighborhood, Jackson Ward.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so yeah, exactly.
Jackson Ward was a German neighborhood in the 1890s.
In 1890, it was actually mostly transitioned to this really amazing African American, but it started life.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, so that there are these.
No wonder I liked it so much.
Well, no, but I think that there's this subtlety and there's this nuance to everything we think we know.
Right.
And the moment you start, the day you sort of say, I think I know it, that I have the answer to something, or I know everything about a particular topic, and aren't willing to open yourself up to new ideas and new ways of looking at the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because that's where you get the learning. When someone pushes back for us, when, you know, we had an exhibition recently where, you know, there was a group of people that called for a boycott of the Valentine because of a conversation we were having about monuments. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty interesting time for us. But for me, I wanted to know what that meant, you know, and so there were a couple folks within that group that, you know, I just invited to the Valentine for lunch. And that's what a museum experience is. And I know that we love technology. Everybody loves technology. But the fact is, the thing that is different about a museum experience, it's not about, oh gosh, there's this cool thing that I can use to experience the museum. It's you're actually in the same space as a painting of someone who could have been your family. You know, that's a different thing. It's the thing that actually connects you to that person. It's not, there are no intervening technologies. Mm-hmm. You know, we have an amazing array of objects. And so there's a barber's chair that's just been given to us. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, there's a picture of that barber's chair in the shop in Fulton. But there's something different about
physically being there.
Physically being present with that barber's chair.
I've noticed this in my travels, like when you go to a land that is very old, the energy of the place, like when you go to Italy, when you go to places that have have deep, deep history, and you're on the motherland, and you're on the African continent, it just feels different. And Richmond is certainly rich with history.
And that's, I mean, I think for years
Yeah.
and generations, we've tried to run away from what we know is here.
Precisely.
You know, and it's, you know, that there are things in the soil.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that conversation is progressing?
I think it does. I think it
Yes.
is, absolutely. I think, you know, as we dig deeper into Shaka Bottom and really begin to understand, I think what's amazing right now is you've got this interesting conversation going on between Monument Avenue and Arthur Ashe Boulevard. Now they cross each other. Suddenly you're going to have Kenny Wiley
Oh my gosh.
speaking to the monuments, and I know they're going to talk. You know, I mean,
I love it.
I know that there's going to be some conversation when the sun goes down, and you know that will influence all of our conversations.
Yes, it will.
And how we experience each other in the city, because place matters. And so you can't walk down a street in Churchill or Barton Heights or over on Hall Street. You can't walk through a neighborhood and not feel the past. And I think one of the things that's happened is we've not allowed ourselves, because that past has sometimes been so difficult.
Well, I hesitate to racialize things, but I feel like the African American community, to a large extent, has not been able to escape that past. Like that is very present for us. So when you say we haven't allowed ourselves, I would say that might be a construct for white people more, and perhaps some African American folks who are not deliberately. Like I will use myself as an example.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Sorry, I mean that wasn't. I mean, I think that we are in these places.
Yeah.
And for whatever construct.
Yeah.
We've not allowed ourselves to be in those places.
Right. Well, I've just recently gone on a journey where I have allowed myself to go really deep into the history of the African American enslaved person and all the things that we went through. My heart was like really just too tender to go through it, and I had to cross over 40 a couple years ago in order to hold the pain of my ancestors. And so in that respect, I mean, on one hand, as African Americans, we can't really escape it because it's very present for us, and our collective failure to lift up the truth of our narrative and hold it in a sacred space has caused all of us harm, black, white, and otherwise. But it's been an interesting journey to take it on as an African American person and take the personal responsibility to understand that narrative and learn it and really like take it on.
And not accept the barriers
Yes.
that have been put in place of all of us actually understanding
Yes.
our own engagement, our own family's engagements in this history that we have not even been able to talk about.
No.
We've given, particularly with the enslaved story in Richmond, we stripped away the vocabulary to even talk about it.
Absolutely.
You know, so the myth of the lost cause created this sort of mythology that allowed us to escape any real contact with it. So whether it's, you know, monuments, whether it's actually intentionally burying the enslaved story of the city, you know, by putting an I-95 over it and building I-95 through the city, parking lots, gas stations. How can you deny the impact of having the Golden Arches on one of our most important sites and Monument Avenue?
It's crazy.
You know, and I think when it's hard to come into contact with a history that has been destroyed and erased. And so the challenge...
Say that one more time, please. Say what you just said one more time.
It's hard for us to... I mean, you don't even know what's there because it's been intentionally erased.
And that's the argument that some people are making about the monuments as well. You know,
So we're trying to erase them?
yeah, that's the argument that some people are making. Not, you know, I'm really curious with your knowledge and history of the city as we look at things in the past, maybe not the best things historically to look at, but they're real things that happen, and it is what it is. but in regard to how we're transitioning into the future, whether we're talking about the monuments, whether we're talking about down here in Shockoe Bottom, or whether we're talking about the potential Navy Hill project, just putting things out there. I'm curious of your viewpoint as a historian on behalf of how we are, where we are right now in navigating toward the future, and what do you see coming? But I'm really curious of your opinions.
I think that I'm more concerned right now about what's missing. That you can't have a conversation about the future when a bunch of the history of this community is missing from the landscape. Mm-hmm. And so, I know that there's lots of discussion around Monument Avenue and what happens there, and that could change over the next few years. But I am, quite frankly, at this moment, more concerned about what happens in Shockoe. Mm-hmm. That here is this major, important international story. And with the amazing efforts of the Slave Trail Commission and others, that story has been elevated. That commission didn't exist just 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so this notion that there it has been, buried, we haven't even done basic archaeology on the site to even know what's there. Mm. And so I think that for me, I want to see that place in a different light. I want to know I know that there's more there, and we can't understand it until we actually touch it.
What are the barriers? Like, I mean, to me, I feel like if this was an important piece of white history, it would have been funded, excavated, explored, all of the things. Why is our Black history so unimportant that we can't make this happen?
But I think it is happening. I think there is progress being made. There are a number of organizations, and we've been talking about this a long time.
Yeah.
There have been, as you know, there have been lots of studies, and we've all seen those studies. But I do think that
I'm just frustrated by the snail's pace.
Well, you want frustration. You want to get frustration. Don't get. No, I think that
it just makes me, as an innocent bystander, it just makes me feel like it's deprioritized.
No. It should be. We should not have any conversations in this community about anything
until we deal with this.
Until we deal with this piece of our history.
Yes.
Because there are lots of other places we need to go. I mean, there are other pieces of this history, like Little Italy. We need to know about Little Italy. We need to know about the waves of immigration that came after those enslaved people. Mm-hmm. We need to know about all of that complexity, and we are so comfortable in telling it in this sort of black-white way that doesn't even honor either story. Mm-hmm. In either story. And so, no, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And what are the obstacles? I think that it takes time for the work to be done, for the history to be exposed and developed. Mm-hmm. To do it right takes some time, and I think we're afraid to not get it right the first time. But there have been a lot of projects. If you think about Colonial Williamsburg when they opened, it wasn't really the full story. It wasn't the real story. It wasn't, but it took time. But you have to start. You have to. I think that we're living in an age now that we're so afraid of doing something that we are immobilized by that fear, rather than let's just do it. Mm-hmm. Have the public respond to it. Have historians respond to it. Have the research respond to it, and that site and that land can evolve over time. And the story that's told there absolutely will evolve over time.
Will I live to see the story told in Richmond? Will my children live to see the story told in a full and, kind of fruitful way?
Only if every single person gets involved.
Okay.
I think that all of us need to be, showing up, asking the mayor and asking city council, asking our public officials, asking other leaders in our community, asking the Valentine and other museums that are doing work in Richmond history, where the heck are you?
Our stories?
Where's the heck are we on this?
Okay.
And making it a daily, because we have focused, and I think legitimately a lot of attention on Monument Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in many ways it's the same distraction. We will go after the shiny thing.
Yeah.
That is the national conversation versus getting home right first.
All right, you heard that, people. If whether you are black, white, purple, green, or polka dotted, if you want to hear the full story of this place, this important location that we've all chosen, or that is home by birth, by blood, by legacy, by history and heritage, we need to speak up. We need to show up in the places. We need to talk to our legislators, and we need to say that we want our story told. We will watch our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren also miss out on the truth of our story if we're not standing up and asking for and or demanding that our stories be told, because it's here underneath our feet, right?
Right, it's under their feet, it's in our air, it's in the buildings.
Yeah.
And this is, the Core Museum thing, this is not a tweet.
No.
This, if you want this work to be done and done well, you have to be physically present. I know that's a really old school concept, and I'm just old. But the fact of the matter is, until you are in the room with another person saying, this is important to me, it is easy to turn your phone off. It is easy to just flip on to the next thing. And that's what happens in life right now, is we are so moved by the immediate that we don't focus enough on the thing that could make the most difference.
Right.
Both in our personal lives and I think in our communities. I think that, we kind of go, this is my issue of the day.
Right.
It's like, no, it's building your life.
Yeah, exactly,
It's
with intention. So you've been involved with and orchestrated, choreographed so many programs and so many different things, and I mean I've got so many examples swim in my own mind, but can you think of something that you can share with our audience that is either one of your favorite programs that you've instituted over the years, or something that you feel like was particularly effective at telling the story and bringing people together?
A couple things. One is, I think, our walking tours.
Yes.
That actually, because why would you do an exhibition at the Valentine about Highland Park if you can
go to Highland Park?
Why don't you just go to Highland Park?
Duh.
It's like, let's have a nice, it's like, doesn't make sense. Let's put people, if you want to understand the place, you need to be in the place.
Amen. I like it.
But I think our Controversy History series has been one that has...
Say that again slower.
Controversy History.
Got it. Thank you.
Which is a monthly conversation where we bring history folk in and scholars in, and we figure it all out.
Nice.
And so one of the most powerful was this past year, and it was tough because we were looking at the things associated with the Richmond Region Collaborative. And there were some overarching themes there, and there was one of the themes that was looking at workforce development in Richmond. What was going to be our historic example? That's the night we actually took people into the 1812 Wickham House and said, if Mr. Wickham, who is living in this house with his 15, at any given time, 15 Wickham family members, there are also 15 enslaved people in this house.
Wow.
But that's not the wow. The wow is when he needed more help, he just sent someone down the hill 4 or 5 blocks, and he bought a person.
Oh, God.
And so I think that's, when we think about, and what are the barriers, and then we ask the same question today, what are the barriers to workforce development? Some of those things still exist. Those things that are based on race, that are based on ability, this whole of education, of access to employment. Some folks still don't have that.
Right.
And so there is this very exaggerated but real example of the early period of enslavement in Richmond that puts all of those conversations in a context that actually challenges us to think a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we got we got a lot of feedback that night that there was probably not equivalent, and I think that there are some equivalencies that can be made with that.
And are your audiences for that diverse? Because I know TMI helped you with some community conversations back in the day.
Was there at the founding.
Yes.
And occasionally, and it happens every once in a while.
Okay.
And it's always fun because we always do the sampling to see who's in the room, right?
Right.
Well, there have been in the course of the time, there have been actually 4 or 5 nights when the room was identical to the region.
Wow, that's incredible.
Across all the sort of things we use to label ourselves. And so it was all there, and it happened a couple times. That doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, you know that you're in that special moment. And
that's a real conversation.
You can look at it's always a little younger. And a little more well-educated, but there are nights when we suddenly have this room where there are people that just kind of look like the place. And so those are rooms, and that's the other thing I think is important. I mean, we say show up. Show up, be in that room, understand that your story is vital. And if you're not in that room, it's a story that may not be told, and you have to be there. And civic work, being a citizen, is work. It's not something you can do at home. It's something that you do in the street. It's something that you do in public meetings. It's what you do with institutions that are trying their damnedest to tell the story the way it should be, and having active participation in that requires us to break down our own institutional barriers, and there's still barriers at every place. I understand that there's so much more work that all of us have to do to make sure that people, whether it's language or transportation, all those things that are just sort of the barriers that happen. How do you do that?
This is a space where I feel like proximity is something that we lack across so many of these differences. And what you're creating is an invitation for people to show up and sit and dwell in their narratives and learn across narratives and learn across differences. And that's a really powerful invitation. Because we don't get that access to each other in a safe space.
In a forgiving space.
Yeah. That's sacred, man.
I think that we've forgotten about forgiveness. That people, back to the original conversation, I believe that people are basically motivated for the right reasons. I can't get up in the morning if that's not true. And so if you have spent the time to get yourself to this room, that whatever happens in that room, and it might offend you, it may do a variety of things, but you need to understand the person is there for the reason, the right reason. They want to learn, and we are all stumbling through this. We're all stumbling through this. And this ability to say, I don't know how to say this. I don't know what to do about this. I'm here because I have an idea. It might be wrong, but I have this idea, and I feel like I can come here and do that.
So, Bill, there is this paradigm, this construct that was recently named for me that I love, and it's the idea of wearing your whiteness responsibly. And you are among the people who I feel are wearing their whiteness responsibly.
We all fail.
Of course we all fail. I'm a whole diversity practitioner, and I fail every day.
But it's like, I just,
But do you have any words for, because there are a lot of people who look more like you than they do like me, who, like, I also want to believe that people are generally motivated by the good and aspire to be better people. But there are a lot of people who really are lost and they don't know what to do. They look like you. What words of wisdom would you offer to white people who are not yet wearing their whiteness responsibly, who have not moved into the space of co-conspirator and ally the way that you have? You do a lot of stuff, even personally. What do you say to those folks who are trying but are lost?
I think we're all lost. I think we're all lost.
But some people aren't doing things. You are in the world doing.
Yeah, I would. But we all, it's just a matter of understanding that there's a moment where you have to make yourself uncomfortable, and that if you're not intentionally making yourself uncomfortable at some point, which, as you know, is one of my favorite lines. It's like we should make ourselves uncomfortable. We like that feeling of being safe, no matter where we are. We want to be with our tribe. We want to be with our people, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find spaces where there's a big old tent, because the world is defined by our networks, social networks that are actually social media networks. And so we don't even, if I didn't have a wonderful network of friends, I would never know about half of the things that go on in town, because I lived in a particular zip code, and these are my circle of friends. I wouldn't even know that I'm supposed to, there were an opportunity to be in a place where I might learn something.
Oh, you don't look at the Facebook events? The Facebook events will tell you where you need to be. The Facebook events will tell you everything.
And the good stuff that's happening is not necessarily
on Facebook events.
And so unless you're invited into these places, and accept the invitation when it's given.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, that's why we invited you, Bill, because as we're going to definitely plug this all over social media, and we want to create safe spaces where people can actually have an opportunity to capture real things. So the information that you're sharing, it starts by showing up in places like this as well, where there are people who are making a concentrated effort to point out real stories and real people, and not just the typical internet garbage.
And there are little places all over town where this is happening. It's not just in museums, in the VMFA and some other institutions in town, really just doing these kind of amazing jobs.
Urban Hang Suite.
I was going to say Urban Hang Suite. There are places of faith. I'm not one of those people, but in fact, I know that there are houses of worship where these things are happening in a really amazing and powerful way. So you got places that are all trying, and some of them are the traditional places, some of them are new places, but it's being open to the invitation, but it's also hearing for it.
And I like the idea of being uncomfortable, because sometimes we say no to the invitation, or we push it aside because we're not going to feel comfortable when we get there. I don't want to go there because maybe when I get there, people won't look like me, or I don't have anybody to go with.
Well, I do have a chronic problem. I mean, because I had cancer a few years back, and I said that I would never say no to an invitation, because every invitation was a gift.
Wow. Is that why you're here? Thanks, Bill.
No, I'm here because of you. No, I think that it's important that every time someone offers you a personal opportunity, it's an invitation. And, we can get exhausted in doing that.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of weariness in well-being or well-doing, I guess.
But that also contributes probably to why, you said everyone's lost, but I think that's the difference between some people who are completely lost and those people who are making a daily effort to try to navigate and find their way.
But I don't think people are lost. I think people just don't know. No one is lost. No one.
I don't know, Bill. I think some people are lost.
Well,
they feel that way. There's a lot of despair.
There are people that feel that way because of their life experience.
Lack of understanding, lack of knowledge.
I think it's not. I don't somehow the word lost, because I don't want to believe that anybody's lost. I think that we have lost people.
We have lost people.
Who is because of we have
we've actively lost them.
We have actively lost people. I think there are communities of people that live in places where they have the life experiences because we have left them.
We've left them behind.
We've left them. And whether it's the legacy of Jim Crow, whether it's the legacy, other legacies of our history. Because by saying their loss means that it's their responsibility.
Right.
For us to say,
beautiful.
we've walked away, maybe they're not lost, we just don't know where they are. We're not where they are.
Wow, that was.
And
Yes.
so I'm sorry, I kind of get.
No, I love it.
No, that's great.
Like
Interesting perspective.
we were talking to some folks recently around like mass incarceration. Like when I think about the population of people who have either been in prison or affected by our penal system, there's a lot of leaving folks behind that we've done. There's a lot of
Because we've used a vocabulary that leaves people out. You're going to get me started.
No, I love it. Do it.
Because the term we use is the pipeline to prison.
Yes, it's terrible.
If you are a first grader, and they're not saying directly to you, but you know somebody's in the background saying, "Gotta get these kids off the pipeline to prison." Well, no. What the conversation ought to be, we're going to guarantee your success.
Yeah.
There's no pipeline to anywhere other than up. And my parents would have never said to me, even though we were a poor family, my parents would have never, ever would have thought that I was on some sort of pipeline to someplace. Because I had teachers that believe that. And so if kids are surrounded, we have to take responsibility for the kids and for our community and say, you are not bound for anything. We want to make sure that we're all having the opportunity.
It's the attitude that you have to have to do that. That's a difficult one, though.
And it's a vocabulary that, words do matter.
Yes, they do.
Words really do matter. And if a person hears a certain word about their lives to describe them, enough.
Well, but I think
you come to believe it.
I think about all the conversations we've been having over the past few days, though. I agree with you from the standpoint of saying that when it comes to leadership, I feel like it should all be up. It should be. The goal is, you lead people in, you lead people over, you lead people up. But leadership, unfortunately, always can be backwards as well. So I like the attitude or the concept of saying that this is how it should be. It's the attitude, folks. But the reality is that institutions don't always contribute to that direction. And that's why there is, unfortunately, a pipeline to prison, because everyone in the school system doesn't have that attitude. Right. All systems are not measuring all aspects.
And that's why I think it's how do we change the system?
I believe it's
rewrite the narrative.
We need to rewrite the narrative. Yeah. And when you think about the history of Richmond, if you look at the photographs, and actually I was having this conversation the other day with someone with the Free Press, and the Free Press always has a photograph of a child on the cover from the beginning. And about what does success look like? Mm-hmm. Compare that to the images and photographs that are in some of our other media. Yeah. And so if you are consuming regular media, the only thing you're going to know about Richmond's African American community is Gilpin. Yeah. And yet, here's this rich history that is Maggie Walker and sort of the Jackson War stuff. But I would suggest we need to push that story to the 1940s and 50s to Barton Heights, where you have this amazing center of intellectual and social capital over there, doctors and lawyers. A story that no one, other than really some amazing people in the African American community who shared it with us, why is First African Baptist Church over there? Why is it there? It's because that was the center of this community with Doug Wilder and others who were members of First African Church. That's where the leadership was. That's where they were living, where folks were living. And so this notion of balancing, absolutely, we have to acknowledge some terrible stuff happened here and happened to our family and our friends things were done that cannot be spoken.
As we transition here toward the last, we have about a good 15 minutes. Can you focus a little bit in your conversation on what you think are the highlights of what's occurring in Richmond right now? The best things that you see happening in the city.
Best things.
Besides my wardrobe and fashion, other things.
Yes,
Bill.
well, other things.
Yes.
Really, the big statements are here.
Okay.
No, what's that? What I would. Yeah, there are some things. I think that's what's happening at the VMFA and with the Candy Wiley statue, the renaming of Arthur Ashe. And while it is going on forever, I think the conversation around monuments really is. These are things that we, because we live it every day, don't understand how special it is, because we're actually having conversations that other places aren't having because they aren't reminded every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are always surprised, I think, when they come to Richmond at the level, and for us to live here, it's like of the level of candor.
Yeah.
Because we talk about it.
Yeah.
We put the sofa on the front porch with the refrigerator, and it's okay. But I think that's one of the areas that some really interesting things are happening.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I think that there are a number of institutions, and I'm going to go from the institutional side, but I think the work that's being done at American Civil War Museum, the new leadership at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and of course the Valentine.
Of course.
But I think that there is, within the sort of folks that are responsible for the public history piece, the institutional kids, there's some really good things happening.
We're going to be talking to Christy Coleman, of course.
Of course. Should have put us on the sofa together. That would have been fun.
There's always time.
Yeah.
We'd be on the couch. We'd be out. I think that, but the other thing that's happening is that communities are also taking responsibility. So you can look at individual initiatives in whether it's North Church Hill, some work that's being done in the Latino community in South Side. There are these communities that are organizing from the grassroots, that are doing things that need to push against institutions.
Yeah.
That are equally important. I think folks like Free that are working on that counter-narrative work that has to be can't be done by the public historians, but are things that can push against and inform. And it's happening everywhere. I think there are lots of people that are working to push. So on the history side, I think those are the great things. I think that there's so much going on downtown.
Yeah.
I think that so there's the Broad Street stuff too, that sort of with the ICA and other institutions along Broad Street and the arts, it's pretty amazing, which includes Urban Hang Suite.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like the epicenter. What you talking about?
Right. I mean, like there's the ICA and
Just left, actually.
Exactly. Right there.
We should do that for the camera.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure that we do the ad.
And Free will be here as well.
And Free will be here.
So that means we'll have to
she's,
get Kelly.
but I mean, I think there are people that are just kind of doing.
It'd be good to maybe we need to, after we go through everyone, maybe we need to have like a big
party,
circle
big old
couch.
circle, yeah. Okay.
We you know what? It'd be so much fun.
You could just lay back,
Right?
like you were earlier.
We'll just populate everyone around.
But I
That'd
think,
be great.
but
Yeah.
I think
They're our
that
friends.
there's so many people that are so passionate around this issue of understanding space and taking ownership of space that may have been taken from communities in the past, and reimagining the space that is yours by right. Yeah. And so I do think that there will be progress in Shaka Bottom. But I think it will also be, but it is going to be slow.
Yeah.
It's going to be slow. What else is possible?
Well, I'll say, to piggyback on that, that is part of what my motivation and excitement for when Dr. Jana joined the podcast. It's because I knew that this type of energy could be created and people like yourself could come on and go out there and talk about the things that we're talking about, and it could just be incorporated into more conversations.
And I have to thank you for essentially naming. I didn't have like a specific organizing idea around who I invited, but I knew who needed to be in the conversation with us.
Well, they're all there.
Yes.
Because I mean, the wonderful part is in many ways we're co-conspirators.
Yes.
And each of us have our own roles. And I think we kind of know.
Yeah.
We've never. Actually, it'd be great to have a conversation
I think
about.
we might have to
that,
call
what would be like, so, Christy, what's your role in this thing?
Yeah.
And Free, what's your role?
Right.
Other than to be queen.
We need to do this.
I like that.
But I think that
it may need to be a live show.
And so I think that there's a lot. I mean, I think that while we can fuss, I mean, I think that there are some really, I mean, we can have some heated discussions, but at the end of the day, it comes back that thing is being forgiving.
Yes.
That this notion that you can say something not have your intention questioned.
I like to call it grace. I feel like we need more grace for ourselves because, like you said, none of us is perfect. None of us has arrived at some magical location of total inclusion and acceptance. And we need grace for ourselves, and we need grace for the other as we're navigating these really freaking challenging conversations. They're fraught with emotion and difficulty.
And that you can have a personal agenda and have a community agenda.
Yes.
They can coexist.
Yeah.
And just acknowledge that.
All right.
But making sure that your personal agenda is on the table.
Amen.
It's being aware of who you are, what your biases are, but understanding that is a value that, I have the old white man privileged place at the table. Mm-hmm. I got it.
And you know it.
I know
and you use it for good.
And try to.
Yeah.
Try to.
I have evidence that you have.
But no, it's like you don't know.
You gotta keep doing it. It's not a one-time deal.
But if you get someone that says, "We did this," and we all get those folks that say, "Well, you have to just, it's again, getting up every day, doing what you can, going home, feeling good about the day, knowing that, that's not me actually, not feeling good about the day. Because actually get home and going, I could have done this better. There are things that there's things I should have said that I didn't say. And I go back through that whole list every night. And that's part of what can I do tomorrow? Yeah.
That's why I love you, Bill. You're amazing.
Yeah, because it's just like but the things I do, it's like such a.
Well, don't be too hard on yourself because, like, on behalf of myself and a great number of African American women, African American men, LGBTQ folks, like, in terms of using your privilege on behalf of those who don't always get the seat at the table, I've watched you do this consistently over the years.
Yeah,
and I've
only got one failure, and I think that we got to, we're working on it. But still, we need to get people into the profession, into the history museum field. Art museums have been very successful, but I think that where I failed in my leadership is that we still don't have people coming into the academy.
Let's make a pipeline starting in middle school.
But we don't need a pipeline. We need a staircase.
A staircase. Fine. Yeah. Can it be spiral?
It can be. Let's call it a spiral staircase.
Spiral staircase. All right.
But we need to think up, not pipeline underground.
Great. No, that's right.
But
spiral
I think
staircase.
Bill definitely doesn't like the word pipeline.
He does not like the word pipeline.
I don't. I just think it's dark and
and wet and gross and stinky.
Just wet.
I got you.
It's just, I'm sure they're nice, clean pipelines somewhere. but I do think that we need to be thinking. If you go to like an American Alliance of Museums conference and you look around the room,
not so much.
You see a lot of something, and it's how do we convince? How do we make? Not convince. That's the wrong word. No. How do we welcome? How do we bring new people in, and have people understand the power of the work that you can do around narrative in history museums within the sort of formal structure of a museum that could have a significant impact on the community.
I found that the young people particularly young African American people who have limited access and limited resources, don't know the breadth of careers that they could engage in. And it's a matter of letting our kids know, literally from middle school, let us show you these options. Like if I've known in middle school, that I could be part of telling our story, our rich and beautiful history. I could dedicate my life to that and make a really good living too.
I totally
People just don't know.
I mean, it was not a part of, I mean, the notion, and I think my family still has like a problem.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing in my cultural background that have ever indicated to me that I could make a living working in a museum. That was something volunteers do. That's something that old white women did with their blue hair, actually. About that shade. About that shade. But I think that those are, I mean, that the notion that you could do that. And the only reason that I stumbled into this is I had a friend who was a friend who said, you know, you'd really be good at this. You have some of the skills needed.
Amazing.
And someone took a chance on me 35 years ago and said, you know, wow, you don't have, and I would not be hired today.
Right.
Because of the kind
all of the credentials required at this point.
You know, and I understand that wouldn't, you know, but I want to make sure that there's an entire generation of new faces that are going to have the piece of paper to make sure it's right.
Right, because who's telling the story matters.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we will have is a program that we'll start advertising, so I can do a little plug. We have a program where we will have 2-year full-time paid internships for entry level.
Wow.
Great.
So if you have an undergrad degree in almost anything and have this little notion that you might want to work in a museum, we're going to have 4 positions and ultimately, hopefully more, that will be these guaranteed 2-year things.
That's great.
And so, you know, we need to make sure that group of people look better than the people that are currently, you know.
We'll make sure we cut that up and send it specifically to places where people can be, who's interested.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's every university that, you know, everyone's struggling to have meaning in their life. I think that this particular generation, more than any other, they're more like me than the ones in the middle, are much more values driven, and they you know, they're not as, you know, while they're entering life with a lot of student debt, which a lot of us had the privilege of not having. They still want to be in a place that they can make a difference and be modestly rewarded for that. And the notion that you can do that in an art museum or history museum.
It's not on the radar just yet.
Not on the radar. And so that's my big failure. I mean, it's a huge failure.
Oh, there's still time. You're a young man, Bill.
After 25 years, but I think, you know, it's over 25 years is what we're trying to figure out.
The thing.
You know, it's the thing that is sort of the elephant in the room that we need to deal with as an institution, that every institution needs to deal with, because you can't break down the barriers unless you break the barriers in your own institution. So what we always ask, we have a more diverse board than we have staff, and we talk about it at every staff meeting,
right?
Because we got to figure that out. We got to figure out and do something about it. So, there's just so much work to get done. And in this community where history, you can't do Richmond without its history. And I love, there's a recent tourism study that, I love when people do the research and they get the research back and it confirms what you believe. And it's sort of contrary to what a lot of folks think. So there's a recent survey done of people who have come to Richmond, and it asked the question, why did you come? And how satisfied were you with your experience? So if you plot reason for come, satisfaction, there's a little tiny cluster of things up in the corner. Highest reason to come, highest, and it was history museums, art museums, art galleries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And yet, what do we talk about? We talk about the frickin' beer And the restaurants. Well, those are things that people do.
That's
while,
also, yeah.
Those are things that people do while they are here.
It's not why they come.
But it's not why they come, because they want to have that really lovely food.
You have data on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
How much in that? What's the breakdown as far as black and white?
I don't know what I'm sure they could drop the numbers.
I'm just curious of how many black people in that percentage actually come here for the history.
Yeah.
I'll probably a small number, but
I think we'd be surprised.
I think it's actually, no,
I think when we look at sort of fraternal groups and sororities and family reunion stuff, see, the folks don't even talk about family reunion as a big thing, but family reunion tourism is a huge deal.
Well, Black RVA has been successful since its launch.
Yeah.
It's like
right,
the whole
and I
thing
think that
qualifies.
just understanding that what we call tourism
And what we call history, too.
and what we call history. But the thing is, we don't usually include like family reunions and church stuff and all that in the tourism stuff. It's like soccer.
yeah.
Or something else. And so I think there's some biases in what we call tourism
Right.
Yeah.
that we just need to acknowledge in terms of who is a visitor, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to extend the invitation. You're going to be at our round table, right? Our co-conspirator.
Oh, heck yeah, I can't wait. Now, you know,
Great.
Yeah.
we need wine.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Sorry. I mean,
That'll be
No
it,
problem.
Gigi.
Red or white? Red or white?
All, yes.
all.
Okay.
Just don't bring me that craft beer stuff.
No
Okay.
beer. I'm no beer either.
You know, it's like I got it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to close. Your PR just told me that you're next to be scheduled on CNN, so I know that you have a busy schedule today.
Not seeing it. I need to be on the road.
Hey, before we close, just some fun facts I'm interested to learn about you. Do you have a favorite restaurant?
Oh no. Yeah. Well, it depends on the mood.
Yeah.
Depending on the mood. Dutch and Company around the corner from my house is the place that I go when there are two places for therapy. Dynamo, which is this amazing Italian, and they're just places, and sometimes it's not even, well, with these places it's about the food, but it's also just about feeling like you can let your hair down.
The ambiance, the environment.
It's a vibe.
Yeah.
You know, and so it has nothing.
Bill, you're such a young man. It's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
Wow. Knew you was 25. You know that's the new word with the young people now.
I do have a vibe every once in a while. Gee, what is this?
All right, restaurant. What else?
Pork or beef?
Or chicken?
Do you eat any of that?
Or fish?
I eat all of it.
Okay, so you're not vegan. You're
He's
not vegetarian.
also a really good cook.
No.
Amazing cook.
Yes. It's just. I think that food for me is a thing.
Yeah.
So, like to cook it, like to eat it, brings a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
Because flavor is really important.
Do you like sports?
I don't.
Oh man.
I know I'm not one. I wish I could. I don't.
Yeah.
You know, other than my work and my food.
Yeah.
You know, life is pretty full.
Yeah.
As it must.
Because you're saying yes to all those invitations.
Yeah.
Well, but you know, but I think when you get home, you really just want to do the Netflix.
And chill, huh?
I didn't say chill because
Randy said chill.
that may be what you're doing.
I'm not even watching.
You've heard. I've heard that there's Netflix and chill,
Yeah.
but I would not have any personal experience.
I just have a heated bed and a weighted blanket. And
Right,
Netflix.
exactly. Turn the heat up.
Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
It was. I just love listening to you. I really enjoyed it, and I have a bunch of mental health folks that I'm going to follow up with you and trying to see if I could bring them into the museum.
That'd be great.
Yeah, they. I learned a lot of my history through them. You know, I have a lot of former social workers, former doctors, former attorneys who just are no longer the same people that they were. But when we put them in natural spaces and natural environments that remind them of where they, the past, where they came from, it's really therapeutic for them.
One of the things that we do actually is a whole series of programs in senior centers.
Please come visit one of ours. We have one on Nama Road.
We'll be happy to, and it's free.
Great.
But we know that, just having images of what the city looked like, just what the place looks like. And we've learned that things that, like we do a Native American program, and so the notion of just making clay pots and, and so we thought it was for years we've been doing, since 1902, we've been free and open to Richmond Public Schools. But we go, you know, some of those things we do
with the kids,
the kids are absolutely things that you can do in senior. So we have a whole program, a whole set of programs that we do because, you know, memory care, we know that there are people sitting across the city in facilities, senior facilities, that don't get the kind of social stuff they need.
Yeah.
And so we take care of kids, you know, we take care of the kids, sort of like, but who's thinking about the other end of this?
Beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to follow up with you on that.
Good, better.
Thank you all. This has been episode 20. Great number to be on here with us. Tiffany was just talking about the magic number 20 the other day, so I'm really excited. This was episode 20 of season 2 with Bill Martin and Dr. Jana, the Randy Wilson podcast. We'll see you next episode. Thanks.